Start. Okay, well, welcome everybody to another session of Global Technopolitics Forum's staff meeting on Sunday, March 14. Due to time change, actually, we don't have most people because there has been a bit of confusion about it. So I received several text messages indicating that people made a mistake and they won't be able to do it. Nevertheless, we start with, we have a new participant. So I would like to ask Anna to introduce herself to everybody. Anna?
Hi all, I'm Anna. I'm a recent graduate in International Relations and French, and I'm very happy to join all of you today.
Well, welcome. Great to have you.
Anna, could you talk a bit about your research interests?
Sorry?
Could you talk a bit about your research interests?
Oh, yes. So, I chose to study international relations. I'm very interested in geopolitics, anything to do with globalization, especially financial and cultural globalization. I'm very interested in that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So do we have Leo here? If Leo is here, we could start with Leo. No?
No.
Okay, then Greg, why don't you make announcement also? Most people are not here, but anyway, maybe it's not. We could start with your announcement.
Oh, I think most people know that USC received money for a Director of National Intelligence Center of Academic Excellence. So I've been trying to play as much of a role as I can in that. It's off to a pretty good start, I think. We're having a symposium on the 8th and 9th of April. And what I'd like us to do is present 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 short presentations about our work, particularly our work, because our work, I think, has a connection to intelligence. We're looking at IT, we're looking at disinformation, we're looking at ICS. So all those things, it seems to me, have an intelligence dimension to them. And I thought this would be a great chance to show off the work of you all, basically, the work of the forum. And so it's the time slot for us is 11:30 to 1 on April 8th, 11:30 to 1 Pacific on April 8th. What we probably should do, buddy, is get in touch with people individually and see if they're available and like to present. Or
yes,
this is a kind
I will send an email to everybody. Yes, we'll send an email to everybody announcing it because most people are not here today. Announcing it and asking anybody who is interested to enroll. We also have a template for PowerPoint, so you will receive a link to the template and we take it from there.
I imagine about, as I said, up to 6 or 10-minute presentations with then 5 minutes for Q&A and for an hour and a half. I think it's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it also provides visibility to those of you who present. So I think it's a very good opportunity in that sense. So next, James, maybe you want to talk about your work. I didn't see you uploading any reports, so.
Yeah, sure. So I'm taking this time to rewrite the proposal. So there's nothing done yet. There's no report yet. Probably, hopefully, sometime next week, I'll be able to submit the rough draft for review. But currently, I'm just working on rewriting the proposal. I did an outline last week and kind of set the pacing I set with Mara in an earlier meeting. So I guess that's kind of an update on what I've been doing.
Good. Oh.
James, is it a proposal or a white paper, what you're writing?
A proposal.
Great.
Okay, so we look forward to read it. Yeah, Dan, would you like to talk about your work?
Yeah, so this week I just finished up all of our citations and references. And then Kai is still finishing up. I think he's working on comments that Maura gave him last week. And he's finishing up his part on regulation, which should be probably done by the end of this coming week. And then the other thing that I was kind of tasked to do is look at the SATC grant proposal, like outline.
Yes.
So I've been reviewing that and have kind of thought of some ways that I think our paper is structured in the right way for that grant. But I think once Kai is done with his sections, we just go through it one more time to kind of think about ways that we can make it a little bit more focused towards that grant.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any comments, Greg?
No, sounds good. Sounds like it's right.
Yeah. So let's see who else is here. Not many. So Eduardo, is there anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Pari. I guess I'll take the opportunity of there not being a large crowd here today to share some of the developments, particularly from a theoretical perspective, that have been sort of emerging with the initial stages of this book research. The one thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, Greg, Pari, Paul, is that there seems to be a large focus on the tension between group rights as represented by the state and individual sovereignty as perhaps what might be the major theme of the book going forward. Although I'm not an expert in law or civil rights, I think that this is an interesting focus from an anthropological point of view, as so much of our liberal democratic institutions depend on the concept of individual sovereignty. Now, these technologies, they bring a lot of benefit, but the one concern is that by preempting individuals' behavior, and we see this in the application of these technologies for policing, for example. By preempting individuals' behavior, their individual sovereignty is in a way eroded, especially if the state and various state-funded apparatuses take action based on those suggestions that are made by the algorithmic technologies. So I'd like to get your thoughts about this tension between individual sovereignty and group rights as represented by the state's responsibility to protect the security of the individual.
I think it's a really interesting, yeah, it's a really interesting tension, isn't it? And now it seems to be we add to that, we have a sense that it's not just the tension between the state, what the state needs to do, and individual sovereignty, but now increasingly people are talking about the sort of rights of a group, kind of a group within the state, particularly groups that have been either underrepresented or systematically mistreated, and thinking of how those very, very big deal and Aboriginal groupings, but not just. And so that seems to me to further complicate what is, how do you think of group rights in relation to individual rights, in relation to the role of the state, the bigger group? That seems like a really interesting set of issues, and one that seems like you're exactly positioned to do, Eduardo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Greg. Yeah. And where I think this will be interesting, and I hope to get as much guidance from you folks as possible, is that there is a redefinition of the individual that's going on, a redefinition of what it means to be a citizen. And of course, I'm not just thinking now, I'm thinking about the next 10 or 20 years, which are just around the corner. And as soon as developments like quantum computing or 5G comes fully online, and we have the Internet of Things, and I've heard even now the Internet of Senses, in which it's our biodata around like our perceptions, our sensory perceptions are going to be uploaded to a cloud and then processed for various predictive purposes. So this really redefines the notion of citizenship. And I'm excited about it, but also I'm a little bit wary that I might be getting into territory that's beyond my abilities. Because yes, Barry.
I think I would add to that the notion of nationhood is also changing. So it's not just a citizen, but actually what is a country and where are we belong to? There was a period of time when the identities was very firm. They started to erode actually, like somebody like me suddenly with 3 citizenship. So it kind of starts to confuse those. Then suddenly we have this cyber identity, and place now has really little relevance. So all those things, I think it's not just legislation, but as an individual within our own mind, concept of citizenship is eroded already, and it's getting further and further eroded as time and place lose their meanings. Nationhood means its meaning. So putting all that together, I don't think in 20 years there is actually a strong sense of citizenship the way we used to think about it. And I think new forms of identities are emerging, which was partially cyber, partially, experiences rather than actually the place as it used to be. I think place is increasingly becoming fluid and less colorful in many ways.
It also seems like to me that in some sense the very notion of personhood is changing as well, right? Mm-hmm. The things, the developments you described, Eduardo, do really go to what it means to be a human being and a person, an autonomous individual with rights. Henry Kissinger, of all people, wrote a nice piece a couple of years ago, I think in the Atlantic, a kind of philosophical piece, one that I wouldn't have necessarily expected from him, but it was really quite insightful about what all this means for the nature of personhood.
I'd like to have a link to that article if you have access to it.
Yeah, let's see if I can find it.
Okay.
Just a thought, maybe somewhere between Pari and the comments that you were making, and Greg, where you were going about the nation and the self, nation on one hand and the self on the other. I somehow wonder where the enterprise fits into that equation, because it seems to me that, and I once thought it'd be sort of an interesting novel to talk about how an enterprise sort of displaced the state as the arbiter of, people and how their rights were determined. And even you can think of enterprises as conducting foreign policy, which to some extent is happening today, right? And maybe this has some historical antecedents. If you think about some of these huge trading companies in the 19th century, the East Asia, what do they call themselves? I mean, there were a British one, there was a Dutch one, the Dutch East Indies, conglomerate there. I mean, these enterprises were in some way more powerful than the states that they nominally represented. And I think there's some of that's going on today. I mean, maybe that will change with more regulation, but you could very well imagine that people might be more beholden to an enterprise than they would to a state. And then on the other side, this issue of personhood, and I was struck, and once again, I'm just tossing out ideas here, but it struck me a couple of days ago. I happened to see in the same sort of set of articles, I was looking at one article that was on the evolution and increasing quality of deepfakes. So being able to represent a person virtually, but effectively that would be completely obscured for someone who's looking at this, wouldn't know whether they're dealing with the real person or just a representation of them, right? So that I think affects how we think about a person and how they're defined. And then behind that was an article about gene editing. So in some way, at two ends of the spectrum, we have literally physical changes that will be going on that will affect the person as we understand it today. I mean, obviously there will be regulations that creep in there as well that will have some sort of effect on how far that goes and what the parameters are. But I think in some way, they're sort of these two tracks that will ultimately have some impact on the contours of how we limit and define what a person is and how they act and what their rights might be.
I like to add to that also the concept of groups. Now it's really networks. So it's not just physical groups. We add to that also the concept of cyber networks. And that's where we are living quite a big portion of our lives. So that also is adding another layer.
Like this one, Pari.
I don't know in 10 years what is going to happen. But so.
You said
Yes,
like this one,
Eduardo.
like this one. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Where
yes.
place doesn't matter at all.
No, but network of much more, what I mean is huge cyber networks that are taking place, and it's becoming the world of networks. So, yeah, so I think it's becoming quite interesting, but at the same time, pretty difficult to imagine this world of us, even in 10 years' time.
Yes, yeah, and if I can kind of weave together the comments that each of you made, Greg, I believe you're right when you say it's more about group rights, you know, because it's not just the state, then there's the individual, but now there's groups. And I think this connects to a tendency towards individuals to perceive of their political identity primarily through their, whether it's race, ethnicity, or other identitarian markers. Then connect to this, what Pari was saying, that, you know, although there's a lot of, I think, concern about populism and rising nationalism, especially in Europe, and this idea of like the sovereignty of the state, in reality, the concept of nationhood is withering away very quickly, and it's being replaced with multiple layers of affiliation that sometimes are in contrast to the very nation in which an individual is part of. And you know, add to that what Paul was saying about these huge enterprises that in themselves become political actors, and of course we're thinking about the big tech corporations that they can manipulate the very data streams that we're discussing here. Now put these three trends together, and what you get is a science fiction novel. And I'm a little bit worried about, you know, that I find my research sort of taking this tangent towards kind of like maybe extrapolative trends towards a future that seems more science fiction than political science. Also, you know, there's a difficulty of not falling in with not reproducing sort of conspiracy type ways of thinking. So I can imagine like these two road bumps being on the future of this book research. You know, we don't want to be too science fiction-y, but we don't want to be too conspiracy thinking. But at the same time, this stuff is the you know, it makes for a good science fiction novel.
Eduardo, drop the research and do the novel. That would be my recommendation. It's a lot more lucrative, believe me.
Look, I'm worried that this book will sell. For sure, a novel's not going to sell.
But I think our life last year was like a science fiction. Who would have believed what happened last year? It itself was like, even now, looking back, it's kind of unbelievable. So we are living in this globalized world that we haven't quite figured out what are the problems, but we're navigating our way. So it is a science fiction.
I like that, navigating. That's definitely how it feels.
Yeah.
And I think we have been doing it. And going back to what Paul was saying in terms of enterprises, I think that the cyber identity, in a way, that's what I'm talking about. Beyond the networks, it's also these enterprises are holding power the way nation state used to do. And that's where right now we feel affiliated or obliged to follow the rules or answer or return to when we have a serious problem. So, you know, they are right now in control. In fact, I had an incident that happened to a relative yesterday that hacking completely removed their identity and access to anything. So suddenly they were sitting and they had no access to their business, they had no access to their friends, they had no access to their telephone. And it was like lives had been sucked out of them. And the only place they could turn to was these enterprises to find the answer.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Okay.
But if you
So
think about the scale, I
yeah.
mean, some of these enterprises are now valued at over $1 trillion, right? And that's going to continue. So when you have a few 100,000 employees and you're worth over $1 trillion, that's larger than most states as we know them worldwide. I mean, there aren't too many others, states that are larger than that. So in effect, they have become state. I mean, you could very well imagine people saying that they're actually, they don't belong to a specific country as we know it, or a specific nation, but they define themselves as an employee in this larger network of the Microsoft empire, for example, or the Google empire, or Alphabet as we call them, I guess. But I mean, why not? And those are the network, that's sort of the network effect that you were talking about, Paddy. I think that these are these huge conglomerates that are a platform, that have this huge scale, this huge network that encompasses all these people.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there is no discussion, no more further comment on this, then maybe I should ask Mohammed to update us on e-library.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Mohammed.
Yes, sure, I can talk about that e-library. As we had a meeting on Friday, I uploaded all the files, the front end and back end already, but I wanted to have some explanation for the people of our team, how they can add, for example, their documents to the e-library. But I think most of the people, they are not here today. And maybe in the next week, I can talk about how they can put the stuff and how they can upload their files, and how their files can be viewable inside our website.
Yeah, and I assume you developed that user sort of login possibility for everybody, right?
Yes,
Limited. Yeah, great.
For the people of our team. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. If there is no more comment or issue to raise, maybe we can close it. Is there any issue? No? Then thank you, everybody, for being here, and
Have a very good week.
I look forward to our next meeting. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
We'll get the timing sorted out. Have a good week.
Have a good
Yes.
bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.